Hi, I'm Jan Marie, and this is Wyse Talk. Today's guest is incredibly interesting, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to share her with you. Her name is Rena Tobey, and she is the owner of a business called Lively Mind, and that is exactly what it's all about. But to give you a little background, she's a professor at Southern Connecticut State University. She is a writer. She's a playwright. She has her own business. She knows art inside and out. And she's the creator of this art game called Art Ventures that we'll be talking about in a little bit. Rena, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jan.
I'm so excited about what you do. And tell me a little bit, how did you get involved in this PowerPoint that we're going to be showing just a snippet of to the public? How did this PowerPoint come about?
This is part of a larger study that I did of American women artists working before World War II. Who have largely been forgotten, and I wanted to bring them back to mind. I wanted to give them the spotlight again.
Well, that's wonderful, and that's probably accurate of women in a lot of different fields. But how did you even find the women?
It was hard, actually. I went through a lot of books, older books, and found images that I liked, and then started working from there and narrowing down to be able to tell a compelling story about American women's history.
Oh, that's interesting. So why don't we start with, now you do these PowerPoints, and I know you're having one come up at Avon, and for the public to attend, it's free.
Yes, at the Avon Public Library, there's actually going to be 3 talks this summer. It's an art history series, and they are free. There's going to be one a month, and they can check the Avon Public Library site.
They could, but do you have an events page on your website?
Oh, I do, absolutely. There's an announcements page on my website, and they're all there.
Well, that's it. And what is your website?
RenaTobey.com.
That's kind of easy to remember. So I would highly recommend it that people go to this, because once they start listening to you talk about this art, and if you had just a passing interest, you become very, very interested in it. And so I think this is very exciting. Who is the first artist we're going to be discussing tonight?
Well, really, we're going to focus on one artist named Elizabeth Okie Paxton. And she was a Boston artist. And she was married to an artist. This was not uncommon in the day. She really worked in the early 1900s and then put her career on hold in a way for her husband. It's a really fascinating story of a couple.
Now, if I understand it correctly, she started off as his student.
She did. He was sort of a teaching assistant, if you will, in a classroom environment. And she came in and he took one look at her and basically fell in love. She was one beautiful woman. And he was so inspired by her. And he started using her as a model for his paintings. And they fell in love pretty quickly and married pretty quickly.
Now, was she an artist prior to their marriage, or did that come from her involvement with him?
She was already an artist, and she started taking art classes to hone her skill, and married while they were still students. They were both still students.
I see. Okay, so the first picture we're going to see is hers.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so if the director, there we go. Okay, this is an interesting, now this is very intimate. This is very relaxed, disheveled. This could look like my bedroom with everything kind of all tossed all over. And I'm noticing the chair, there's food there, so it's probably wasn't one person. So a lot's going on in this picture.
There is. It's really a provocative painting, and she made this after she was married and still quite young. It was made in 1910, and it was shown in New York City. And for a Boston artist, this was a big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a pretty provocative subject matter, as you've suggested.
Yes.
That unmade bed and the suggestion that it's not just for one person.
It doesn't, and you know what? Interesting, even on TV, they, like in the 50s, I'm sure they would even show something like this.
Clearly.
Because it's just too much for the sensibilities of the American public.
I think so. And when we think she came from Boston, which is a lot more traditional, I guess I would say, than New York City, you can see how she might have ruffled some sensibilities with this. She was a married woman when she made it, so we understand there's a veneer of respectability, but most people looking at this painting wouldn't have known that.
Yes.
They would just see it as that very loved-in, lived-in bed.
Very talented. Like, I feel like the sheets, you can feel the folds in the sheets.
Yeah.
You know, I took, and I'm not even, trust me, I'm not even beginning to compare myself to her, okay? But I took a couple of weeks ago, it was fun. It was a fundraiser, and you would go and someone directed us to paint, and there were like 40 women there, and we would paint what the person said, and we would mimic a picture. And it's not easy. It was although I did think I was Monet in a heartbeat, but I'm thinking to do the folds of the sheets and to get the pillows, the way everything is so natural. This is an incredibly talented woman.
Absolutely, and you point out the softness and the textures of that sheet. They're sort of slithering to the floor.
They are slithering.
Very soft and sensual. And yet that breakfast tray, which you commented on, that's sitting on the chair, is crisp and precise. You can see the reflections of the light on the teapot. You can see the peel on the grapefruit, and it glistens with moisture. So she's showing us as a viewer that she's able to do something very modern, which is those slithering, slurping, kind of wonderful textures of everything melding into each other, and something very traditional, that's still life painting.
And I like also, if you look at the pillows, you know someone was there.
You do.
Yeah, you do. And I'm not sure if I see, do you see two heads or one?
Well, there are indeed two heads, and I always think of those pillows as kissing.
Oh, that's interesting.
And definitely you can see the indent in both pillows. There has definitely been two heads there.
And again, when you commented, I like the crispness of the ironed napkin.
The iron napkin with those incredibly clear creases. Do we think that the woman who sleeps in this bed is ironing her own napkins?
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point. I'm going to say no.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
No.
No.
She didn't prepare that breakfast tray, and so it was brought into her and left for her on that beautifully crisp napkin.
So we know she's a woman of means then.
Potentially, or at least middle class.
Because even the bed, it was not an inexpensive bed, and the sheets were of the quality that they could fold, and they weren't stiff like cardboard or whatever. So that's interesting. You can tell a lot about her socioeconomic status.
Absolutely, and in fact, her shoes tell us something about that too.
Okay, what are you seeing in the shoes?
So we have the little black pump. And the little black pump comes into its own in this time, in the early 1900s. And it's a comfortable shoe with a low heel. And even though it looks fancy to our eye with that ribbon on there, it actually was a very modest, middle-class, low-priced shoe that she would have worn out into the world. And this was a big deal for women to leave the home and go out into the world. It was just starting to happen at this time. So we can start to understand that the woman whose bedroom this is was a, quote, modern girl.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And those shoes tell us that. Now, you can also see that those shoes are not neatly lined up under the bed.
No, they're not. I also like the paper that's there. So she's well-read and informed.
So interesting you point that out, because in paintings up until this time, the only people who would have been reading a newspaper would have been men, because newspapers carried news of the outside world, business, politics, economics, sports, not the stuff for ladies.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
This particular woman is so comfortable with reading the newspaper that she can just discard it onto the floor.
That is so interesting. This is 1910. This is, you might have to help me on this. This is when women were out trying to canvass for their right to vote.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, it takes them 10 more years. But in the 1910s, we really get that resurgence of energy behind women's suffrage. And who was doing that? The new woman. And so we can just imagine her in her black pumps, headed out the door with her picket sign, ready to go march on Washington and make that point that women deserve the vote.
Wow. That is incredible. This is a beautiful painting.
It is.
Where is this hanging right now?
This is in a private collection, actually. And it's
Bummer.
a bummer. But
Bummer.
it has come out and been in museum exhibitions in the past. But it does live in a private collection.
Now, interestingly, this is her first name again is Elizabeth.
Yes.
And you want to call her Betty.
Well, she signed her letters Betty.
So Betty now was married, and her husband had a career as an artist. And you have the next painting, and we want to point out how different the feeling is in this painting.
Yes, this was made 3 years later by her husband, William Gregor Paxton. We can call him Bill. They were Bill and Betty.
Bill and Betty. Oh, I like that.
Bill and Betty, and they wrote letters to each other, so we know how they signed their letters. And you can see the unmade bed. You can see the woman literally reading the newspaper. You can see her sitting in her chair with her breakfast tray by her elbow. It has all the same components as if Bill were responding to Betty's painting. Betty's painting that had big success was shown in New York City. But here it is, a much more literal kind of view. It doesn't have the same mystery and sense of wonder as Betty's painting. In fact,
well, you know, I'm looking at. I've seen these with working with you before, but I'm looking at that painting, and when I look at the bed frame, it looks hospital-like to me.
Oh, it's so good you point that out.
Sanitarium-like.
Okay, so let's talk about that iron bedstead. At that time, there was a belief that iron beds were more hygienic, because you could wipe down the iron and get rid of the germs that might be living there. There was a lot
know your stuff. I have to tell you, you know your stuff. Did you know you knew your stuff?
Oh, well, thank you for
wow.
validating that. Yes, so we actually can make a conclusion about where this woman lives based on that iron bed. Iron beds were used in schools. They were used in hospitals, and they were used in boarding houses, where the people who lived there changed over time. So this modern woman, this modern girl, is probably living in a boarding house. Nothing personal on those walls.
No, they're kind of bleak.
In her hygienic bed, in her plain chair, but her lovely dressing gown, reading the paper, connecting her to the world.
With a cup of tea.
With her cup of tea. Now, we can look at the two paintings side by side. Do you want to do that?
Yes, the next slide will do that. They're side by side, and it's so interesting. The sheets are what catching my attention right now. The I'm not sure of the right word. The carelessness and the wide openness and just disarray and versus
orderly.
Orderly.
Yes, I think Betty's painting is about freedom and expression and sensuality and today. Whereas Bill's painting is beautiful. There's nothing wrong with this painting, but it's less evocative of what might be happening. Betty's painting is all about creating a story, about what happened before this moment, and what's going to happen next, and who are these people, and where are these people?
You know, you bring the artwork to life. Like I go to the Yale Art Gallery, and
wonderful.
I was going to say I just got the brochure for what's coming up to show you. Well, I go to a gallery too, but I go and I look, but I don't. I look, but I think it's more surface for me because I don't interact with it. And I don't talk about the painting. And listening to you and reminding of our conversation initially was about a month ago, this is so more exciting to me to look at this and the stories behind it. It's really you make a very good interpreter of artwork for me, and I'm sure for your audiences.
Oh, well, thank you. And one of the things that I really believe is that these works of art are alive. They're not dead just because the paint is dry. And they have so many stories to reveal and tell, and that's the pleasure in it, is slowing down and being with those stories and feeling what that person who made this was feeling. These are alive as long as we keep them alive. And that's what I want to do with these women artists.
Well, you're doing a fine job. And I also want to question you. Now, we had a previous conversation where her artwork became second fiddle to her husband. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so shall we look at the next slide
Sure.
to make that point? Betty was very talented and was getting recognition in New York, but her husband was a traditional enough man to where perhaps he was just a bit challenged by that. And so he and she, in a probably unspoken kind of way, came to an agreement that she would be supporting his career. And the way she could do that was to make paintings like we're looking at here that are called still life paintings. And they're collections of kitchen objects and food, something that Betty started to specialize in. And every one she painted, she sold. She was just prolific at this, and they sold like crazy. And that's part of the reason why we don't see her in museums, is because these went into private homes to be enjoyed.
Oh, that's very interesting. Did her husband have that kind of success?
Her husband had moderate success during his life. He painted more prestigious kinds of paintings. He painted big portraits, Boston interiors, and he did manage to get some sales and to get in some museum collections. After he passed away, she put all of her energy into moving his paintings into museums. And he is pretty well represented in museums from Boston down the East Coast.
I have to go back to that last picture you just we had on the screen of the teapot. I can't let this go.
Okay, say it.
So when and apparently you never saw this, and I asked the director what he saw, but if you look at the image in the upper corner of the screen, there's a white teapot. The minute I saw this teapot, it looked extremely sensual to me because it reminds me of the backside of a woman. And you didn't see that, and neither did Doug. And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, if anybody out there sees that, please email me and let me know.
Well, and now that you've pointed it out, if we wanted to read the teapot as symbolic, and the way that she had to turn her back on her career and be very much a woman for Bill as his muse, as his model, as his supporter, as his advocate, then we could choose to read it that way.
Oh, that's so good. I love that interpretation of it. And you just came up with that.
Well, I did, and who knows whether there's any meaning to it at all, because we don't have Betty telling us that.
She is telling us that. She's talking to us. That's exactly what she's saying. Oh, that's so good. She turned her back on her. Oh, and that's what countless women did in whatever walk of life they were in or whatever they were pursuing. Oh, I think that will resonate with me. I love that image. I love that. We don't have all that much time left, and I want to go into something else that is really, really exciting, and you can see it on the set a little bit, is the yellow that's popping up and on this, but you created a game, Art Ventures. Now, I want her to go on Shark Tank. She's not going to pursue this on her own. If you wanted to go on Shark Tank, you can call her and tell her or email her. But this is such a great game. And first of all, tell me how this came about.
Well, in light of our conversation, and one of the comments you made is, gee, I'm getting more out of art talking with you than just looking on my own. And most people are like that. And I feel like a lot of people think, oh, art's not for me. You know, it's pretentious. It's whatever. It's snotty. I wanted to take that out of art. And this game is all about laughter and having just so much fun.
It is. And it starts with your game piece.
Yes.
Now I'm going to have you help me open this up and hold it the right way. Now, what is the lights are blue? I'm looking at the monitor.
Oh.
The lights are. Let me just see if I can go like this. Well, the lights are doing a number on. They can't see the specifics.
No worries.
But what this is, it's a game board, and what's unique about this game board is
the players can color it in. So adult coloring is so popular right now. And, you know, I can just think of all the people I've watched play this who are sitting around with a glass of wine or a cup of tea, and they start off playing by coloring the game board first, and then they start to play the game.
That is so cool. Now, I noticed you have something, if they want a clean game board, they can contact you. If they've colored this and they want to, is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
Yes, it's on the website. If they've colored in one and they don't want to keep it that way, or they want to do it again, you can always print off another one off the website. It's a hidden page, only available to people who've bought the game.
And that's really cool. But then the other part of this is that, and what we used to do in school actually, is cover this with contact paper. And then it becomes washable, and they can use erasable markers, and they can keep on coloring it.
I had somebody contact me on Facebook and said that's what she did with her children, and they love doing it because they love coloring it over and over again.
Yes. So first of all, you're right. It is highly an adult coloring book is highly popular right now. Actually, I have a couple of them, but don't tell anybody. I'm just saying.
I think it's great.
But now, what you have are the cards, and you have three types of cards. You have artist, action, and history. Why don't you explain a little bit how this game works?
So the game can be played as a card game by itself if players don't want to go with the game board. And the artist cards allow the players to have wacky encounters with famous artists and famous works of art. For example, the Mona Lisa.
Now I have another card up here, and read what it says about what they can do with this card.
So this is the Mona Lisa card, and it says, you listen to Leonardo da Vinci tell the Mona Lisa terrible jokes while he paints her portrait. Lose one skill point, since this does not help your art practice at all. So in the course of the game, the players are becoming professional artists, and they're collecting skill points, collector points, and museum purchase points. And the player with the most points wins. But this isn't about winning. It's just about having fun.
Yes, yes, yes. Now, another familiar one, so that's an artist card. This is an action card. How does that differ?
So the action card gets the players in action, and you don't need any art skill to do this at all.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a great thing, because I don't either. So this is The Scream by Edvard Munch.
And everyone knows that.
And everyone knows The Scream. So if you were to get this card, here's what you would do. Stand like Edvard Munch's The Scream. Gain one skill point. If you scream while standing in the pose, gain one collector point for your performance art.
Isn't that cool?
So it definitely is about getting people up and moving and interacting in the action cards. And there's a whole lot of different kinds of action cards.
And I could see where adults could have fun with this.
This is definitely an adult game. It's ages 14 and up. The humor is most definitely for a high school student, a college student, or an adult.
Now, I have to tell you, I can draw this.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and what I like about this, it's just the color blue. Yes. And I'm very good with the color blue in my Crayola box. So what is this all about?
Well, this is another action card, and it's based on a modern artist named Yves Klein, who painted blue paintings. So he used a color of blue that became known as Yves Klein Blue. And this card says, make a minimalist work of art in the next 30 seconds. So you have 30 seconds to do it.
So there's not a lot of effort being put into this, yes.
And
that takes all the pressure out.
No pressure at all. And the other players would vote on the minimalist work of art, which might be just a line, or a shape, or the color blue. It's very simple.
Oh, that is interesting.
So you just have your art supplies handy, and you'll be all set.
Then what is a history card?
A history card is probably the most straightforward card in the deck. It allows the players to go around the world and through time. So, for example, we have a history card here of stained glass, and stained glass was used in cathedrals in the medieval period. So this card says, you work on the stained glass of the Gothic cathedral in Chartres. Gain one skill point, because you learn how to make stained glass. So it's all just fun.
It's fun, and you learn a little bit, and it reinforces some of the artists. Now I have to tell you, before the show, I was looking at this one, and I commented to you, this looks like A urinal.
And it is a urinal.
So I was accurate. Don't ask me how I know what a male urinal looks like. But why is this on a game card?
Okay, so this is another action card, and the work of art is by Marcel Duchamp, who was a great provocateur. He was a French artist.
That name.
A provocateur,
Word, yeah.
yes.
A provocateur.
And he was. So he challenged us to think about what makes art. What is art? Can a urinal turned on its side be art? And he said yes. So the card says, Marcel Duchamp made us see ordinary objects as art. Pick out a nearby object and explain to the other players why it is art. They determine how many skill points you receive.
Now that's interesting. They have to decide why it's art. And I'm looking at it, and now that I've gotten past the urinal part of it, it's shape. And the repetitive of the holes at the bottom and the shape of this. It's just very, very, I don't think this will, you can show in the camera. But so you can see the shape of the urinal, and it's on its side.
It is.
And the repetitiveness is right here. It's very interesting.
And it was called in its day the Buddha of the bathroom. You can probably see that in the shape.
Oh, isn't that cute? Now, we're almost out of time, but the last one I want to talk about is, this caught my attention because of the camera look to it.
Okay, so this is another action card, and it says, gather 3 nearby objects and make a mixed media sculpture. If the other players approve, gain 1 skill point.
What happens if they don't approve?
Well, then you get no skill points, and the next person plays.
And they laugh at you and they give you a hard time.
I think everybody's just going to be laughing anyway.
Yes, I think you're right. So this is an absolutely phenomenal game. How can people learn more about you and track where your whereabouts? And we already spoke that you're going to be talking at Avon. What books have you written?
Oh, well, I've written a few books and some articles and essays, and you can access all of those on my website, renatobey.com. The game is available at R.J. Julia, at the Guilford Arts Center, at Hull Art Supply in New Haven, at many of our museums in the state, and on Amazon.
Wow. And I also remember you telling me that you're under contract for another book. How cool is that?
It's all fun.
You know, so many people are dying to be published, and I'm sitting next to someone, well, I'm under contract. Okay, fine. So what is your website again?
renatobey.com.
And you have a contact page there where they can reach you through that.
Absolutely.
Well, this is wonderful. I'm going to try to go to one of your programs. It's actually in my calendar, even though it's in Avon, which is a touch of a drive. I think, to quote that ad on TV, I think you're worth a trip from anywhere.
Oh,
but this was wonderful, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of your presentations and work and your interpretations.
Well, I can't wait to have you there. It'll be such fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jan.
And if you'd like to contact me and tell me what you think this looks like in your mind, you can contact me at jmdteach@comcast.net, or you can always call BCTV Studio if you have a question or if you want to hear more about Rena. Thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jan. My pleasure.
This is such a cool